when we're there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to Career Lab Wednesday. Thank you, Jane. We are live on YouTube and LinkedIn Live. So I want to get started with how you can engage here on Career Lab. I love it when you jump in like Alexander and Eric, and I can talk to you directly over Zoom. If you can't do that, you can always type your questions into the comment section on YouTube or on LinkedIn Live, and Jane will get those over to me. So to set the stage here today, Career Lab Wednesday, we meet every Wednesday noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. My job is to help you in your career. Any career-related questions are on the table. I will tend to focus on, sometimes I'll get into strategy and just, helpful tips. But my specialty is social and emotional intelligence. So I'm always looking at how does your job help you become the person you want to become? How is it helping you achieve your potential? So that's the overall arching concept. And today, our topic is on networking, how to master networking. And this is a really big one. This is an important thing in anybody's career development, whether you're connecting with people at work more, or whether you're connecting with your network in attempting to get a position that you want. More and more, there's a lot of activity online. There's always job listings that you can be applying to. And that's an important part of the process. But I think equally, if not more important, is learning the skills of networking. Especially as you develop in your career, you're going to need references. You're going to have people help you in terms of sorting out what they see as a good fit for you. If you're unhappy in your current position and you're starting to look within the company to develop there, or if you're looking outside the company at other opportunities, it's a really important thing to be able to have people help introduce you, having people where you currently work who can be references for you. So we always want to have you, if you are leaving a company, to leave it in the best way possible, to leave it in good shape, to have open communication about that. And so these soft skills or emotional intelligence skills are incredibly important. Certainly knowing how to do your job, having the technical understanding of what you need to deliver, that's critical. But more and more, learning how to work with people is really how you develop. How, when you're advancing in your career, having interpersonal skills is really important, and networking is a part of that. So I will say more about that as we get going, but we've got people joining in here. So I want to open the floor and see what questions you have. How can I help you? Again, your questions don't have to be about today's topic. They could be anything from, what do I put on my resume? Or how do I be successful in an interview? Or how do I manage my team better? Any of these things. So great. So we have a question. Thank you for your question here in the chat. I am curious about networking and how to maintain connections with people in your career. Great question. I'm curious, are you able to come off mute? Can we talk a little bit more, or do you just want me to address your question in the chat? If you're able to come off mute, feel free to do so, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and where you're at and how networking, how you're seeing this have meaning for you in your career. Oh, got it. Thank you, Eric. Understood. Thanks for joining in, even when you can't come off mute. And check in. So, Alexander, is that something you can share more about? Feel free to come off mute anytime you want, but I'll start talking about this. So, maintaining maintaining networking connections, connecting with people in your career. So, if you're working remotely, I highly recommend that anytime you can, you go to in-person things. And if you're just starting off in a position and it's a lot of remote work, if you can, set up lots of little calls with people. If you can do back, if when things were in person, you could go grab lunch or grab coffee with somebody. If that's an opportunity for you now, if you are working in person, do that. When you're starting at a position, one of the most important things is getting to know people. And it's never too late. If you haven't before, you can start now. One of my contacts was sharing how for years he was a real analytical type, worked in tech, and he would just go into the office, go do his job. During lunch, he would eat lunch in front of his computer so he could kind of be checking emails and going through things that way. And the problem with that for him was that he never developed relationships, and his focus was very myopic, and he wasn't really able to influence things within the company. So when he started networking, he would say to somebody, let's go grab coffee and just catch up, learn a little bit about each other. And that would start to, as he was doing that, he'd start to realize, oh my gosh, like I'm learning more about not only myself and this other person, but about the organization and about what their needs are and how this person sees things at the company. And he started doing that more and more. And pretty soon, he actually started leading trainings in his company on emotional intelligence and hosting networking events. And so he went from being somebody who was constantly behind his computer to being somebody who was engaging with people around him. And he became a sought after guy at work. And so, and I remember this guy, and if he could do it, anybody can. And by the way, so that company that he was working for, they were going through a ton of changes a few years after he started his process of networking, and eventually his position was eliminated. But because he had made contact with so many people, his next steps in getting a job were so much easier because he had people that could say, you know what, I heard about this position over here. I think that might be something that would be a really good fit for you. And you know what, I'd be happy to make an introduction. That goes a long way. That goes a really long way. Having a personal recommendation for you is a big deal. So, okay, great. So I'm getting some more information here. So going into film and broadcasting as a career and have connections with people in the network, but I'm not in great with maintaining those connections, being busy with getting through school. Okay, navigating through that. So you've got a lot of work at school and you do have connections with people who could help introduce you to possible positions in companies in broadcasting and in film. So there's a lot of things that you could do. You could check in and ask them about what they're currently doing. So you can do an informational interview. And the cool thing about this is that everybody likes talking about themselves. So if you can take the time, and I highly recommend you do it. I know that you're busy with school, but oftentimes if you can take a 15 to half an hour break and have a phone call with somebody and just say, as I'm finishing up school here, I'm head down in it, but I'm thinking about my next steps. And I would love to hear what you like about where you're working, or just tell me about your job, what you're doing there. I'm curious about my next steps, and I'd love to hear what it's like for you where you're working. Is that something that you would feel comfortable asking? It would opening up a conversation that way be something that you would be comfortable with? I'm checking to see if this is landing for you, Alexander. Because asking people about themselves and their job gives them an opportunity to think out loud and reflect on what's important to them. Not a problem. Would this work well, especially with people? Oh, absolutely. So, oh, great. No, this is wonderful. I'm so glad you're asking this. So Alexander's asking, so that's not a problem at all to reach out that way. Would this work, especially with people you may not have chatted with for a while? So I suspect, Alexander, that some of what is coming up in your thinking and feeling is, maybe some guilt, or, I haven't talked to this person in a while. And so they might be like, geez, what's up with Alexander not talking to me? Oh, now he's reaching out because he wants something from me. Well, first of all, I suspect you're earlier on in your career. And so you haven't actually let that much time slide between the last time that you connected. And I think what it might actually represent more is your hunger to connect. And you might be projecting some of your own hurts and insecurities. And I say insecurities, it's not, I don't want to make a big deal out of that word. We're all insecure. We're all in our career. We're always wondering if we have what it takes. It's just a part of being human. And so I'm wondering if you're projecting some of that onto the people who you'd like to connect with. And you could say, I'm so glad to have an excuse to reach out to you. I've wanted to connect, and I'd love to hear about what it's like where you're working and what your experience is. I'm looking at my next steps and would love hearing from you. Something like that. You could just kind of name the fact that you regret you haven't talked sooner. It's no big deal. I'm 41. I think in particular about a good friend of mine from high school. I reached out to him not that long ago, and I had exactly the same thing where I was like, oh man, is he going to be mad at me because I haven't talked in a while? Truth was, he felt bad that he hadn't connected with me too. So it kind of went both ways. He was feeling bad about not connecting. I was feeling bad about connecting. And yeah, I just think it's a real human thing. In our culture, we are kind of more work focused and aggressive in that way. And we do have a thing where we don't often put a focus on our relationships. And, you could say that it's bad or whatever, maybe. I think it's something to name and be conscious of. I remember a client of mine was from China, and he was now working in the United States, and he said just how hurt he felt so often because people wouldn't make the effort to meet with him. And he was like, in back in China, people would, really go out of their way to have get-togethers. And he was like, y'all Americans just don't do it the same way. And I keep thinking I'm doing something wrong. And it's a thing. It's a thing to name. So Alexander, I think it's a really meaningful question that you're putting forward here, about, if you haven't talked to somebody in a while, how do you reach back out? And the truth is that you're going to feel some hurt and perhaps some sadness about the time that's passed that you haven't connected with them. And that's absolutely appropriate. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It just comes with the territory. We live in a culture that prioritizes work, and that's the thing. It's again, I'm not going to say whether that's good or bad. That's just something to acknowledge. And and I think that by focusing more on relationships, it'll help you in the long run. So Alexander, let me know if this is landing for you. And also it sounds like you're going to, like you're planning to reach out to some people that you haven't chatted with in a while. One of the great things about this group is that it can offer a level of accountability. And so I'm inviting you to that, Alexander, if you want. Yes, very much appreciated. And yes, that is the plan for me. Okay, good. Fantastic. So I would love next week or in a couple weeks for you to jump back in, Alexander, and let us know how that went. Talk us through that. And I'm very, very appreciative of that question. I think that'll serve a lot of people. So I'll set some more context for Career Lab and how this works. So as people are sharing, even if they're in a completely different line of work than you, be listening to their questions and applying that to yourself and saying, oh, how can I use that? So an opportunity here in a group coaching environment like this is that you can learn vicariously. You can learn from what other people are working on. And so when you share your questions, that helps other people as well. So really appreciate the vulnerability, Alexander, of wanting to connect with people and network, reconnect with people you haven't talked in a while with, and those relationships will be things that help you in taking the next steps. So great stuff there. Welcome, Vern. Good to have you back. And I can say a little bit about somebody else who's been joining in, and their journey in their career, where what they did in terms of networking was they responded to an internal job posting, and it might have been a stretch for them. That position was then filled by somebody else that had more experience in that position. But because they took the initiative, applied for that, they got to interact with more people in the company. So now they're on the radar as somebody who is taking initiative and wanting to develop in their career. So that's another way that you can network in your current company is, be looking at what opportunities are opening up there. And even if you think it's a stretch or if you're not quite sure, go ahead and set up the interview, express interest in it, learn more about it. And that's gonna have you in contact with more people. So this is Career Lab Wednesday. I'm George Miller. I'm a career and life coach. And the focus that I take with people in their careers is to have your career be something that is nourishing and having you develop your gifts and skills. And I look especially at soft skills, relationships, networking, and how to develop relationships that are really meaningful throughout your career. So there's a few ways that you can engage. I love it when you can jump in directly on the Zoom link like several of you are doing. That's wonderful. I can engage with you one-on-one that way. If you can't jump in on the Zoom link, go ahead and type any questions that you have into the comment section in YouTube or on LinkedIn Live, and Jane will get those over to me and I'll do my best to serve you that way. But I'd like to open up the floor. Great to have you on. Nimrod, James, Eric, Alexander, Vern. How can I serve you today? What questions do you have? Vern, I'd love an update. I know that you've been working. And James, I'd also like an update. I think you had oh, James, I just lost you. I hope you can join back in. I know that you had an interview recently.
George, Vern here.
Hey, Vern. Welcome.
How you doing?
Doing well.
Great. It was pointed out recently, and I was listening to it, and I'm really one of those peace people, as you know, that has a real earnest desire, maybe hell-bent, for problem solving. I did that with regard to EIS, environmental impact statements, we talked about days ago. And
Mhm.
then I do that with regard to a lot of other things. My goal in many ways is probably to point out that in my resume that I'm a problem solver. But at the same time, to give you an update, I'm still waiting upon people to get back to me. I've got maybe 5 or something like that happening right now.
Oh, fantastic. So you've got 5 opportunities lined up?
Yeah, I do. And I'm wanting to have those people return my calls or whatever. Question to you. I don't want to be annoying to people, but at the same time, I'm obviously very interested, enthusiastic to find out where things are at. And for one of those, which is over there in Minneapolis, St. Paul, had been almost 3 weeks. And I think at the same time, I would touch base with him, but at the same time, I don't want to be perceived as being an annoyance.
Oh, yep, okay. Well, how have you, tell me a little bit more about the communications up to this point.
Well, it has not been anything as well. The company over there in Minnesota and St. Paul is called SEH, Shorty Ellie Henderson, for a name, drop a name. But I haven't connected up with them, and I'm fearful of doing so.
Well, what's tell me more about being fearful of doing so.
I've been told in the past that touching base with people is a bad thing in many ways. Should we say, one, to learn where things are with regard to that. And at the same time, I don't want to be, should we say, an annoyance to them, but at the same time, obviously got to know. Past history is that, frankly, people make a flip judgment. They say, oh, no, thanks. We're just going to buy. Bye-bye. And I say, well, wait a minute now, hold on. If I'm annoying you, think about it. I don't need to have a no answer right away.
Well, got it, Vern. So have you reached out to them yet?
I have not.
Did you submit an application?
Yeah, and I was interviewed twice.
Okay, great. You were interviewed twice. When was the last interview?
The last time was 3 weeks ago.
Okay. And so how did that interview go?
Really good. And both I felt as though it was real productive.
Okay.
And I guess I'm the only person that's in their cabinet to be considered for the position.
Okay, so they told you that you're the only person.
Yes, that's right.
Well, my goodness. Okay. And so after that interview, they said you're our one candidate?
That's correct. Either me or none.
Okay. So can you tell me a little bit more about the position and what the interview was like?
Well, the title of the position is community development specialist 2. It's a position where oftentimes you're working for communities and at the same time working for them. So in many ways, I don't know if you're familiar with George. I'm not sure if you're familiar with regional planning commissions, RPCs, or COGS. I think in Chicago we have one as well.
No, you've told me a little bit about them. So that's most of my familiarity has been from a few weeks ago when you were sharing about this.
That's great. There's a lot of people who don't know what a COG is. It's another level of government. These days, where an SMA, or statistical metropolitan area, is larger than one county. Indianapolis has decided that in many ways, Indianapolis and Melrose County are to be united. However, over there in Chicago, we find that there's several different counties that are Cook County, whatever, that are all part of a metropolitan area. And so COGS are formed, Council of Governments. It's another level. Municipal governments can be either incorporated or non-incorporated area. It may be a planning commission. That's a city. And then there's county. And then there's state and federal, of course. But oftentimes there's a level that's in between there, and that's an RPC or a planning commission or a council of governments, COG.
Okay. Okay, cool. So
And this-
you have been in communication with the SLH, is it?
Yeah, SEH.
SEH. And so
Yeah.
this is the type of organization that it is. And during the interview, did you get a good sense of what the responsibilities would be?
Yes, I did. I really, really did. It would be both serving the private sector as well as the public sector.
Okay. And how would you be serving the private and public sector?
There is a lot of needs for private sector to be administered by the federal government or by the should we say the government. And at the same time, there is a necessity for the private sector to be compliant. You're familiar with building permits?
Enough to know what you're talking about.
Okay. For an example, oftentimes if you're going to build a building, you oftentimes need to get a building permit.
Yep.
And to get a building permit, oftentimes requires you to put drawings together. And that's what this program, the SEH does. It puts programs together, programs and plans and specifications to get a building permit.
Oh,
in the private
fantastic. Okay. So you would be helping get building permits for?
Things like that for public, for different private companies. Working with the government to get those okie dokies with regard to environmental, with regard to a lot of issues, to obtain the approval to go ahead and build.
Okay, well, so help me on this one, because I see if this would be something that would fit in this wheelhouse. So I like to jump into Lake Michigan during the winter when it's freezing.
You do,
Yeah.
huh?
I do.
Wonderful.
And I am starting to talk with people about building or having a sauna.
Wonderful idea.
So, we could go in January and then have a safe, warm place to, warm back up once coming out of the lake. Now,
Great idea. The Norwegians would love you too.
Yeah, totally. I was thinking up in Minneapolis, they could come on down and check it out. And maybe I'd talk to some people up there about it. But the thing is that the entire lakefront of Chicago is the city is it's all public space. It's a park.
Yeah.
And so if I were
to
have to get a building permit on this, is this the kind of thing I would go to you and you would help make this happen?
Put the plans together. You would go to the city or a company like SEH to get the drawings together to get the city's approval.
Okay, so now, is this something that is, as you're saying, that you're the only candidate?
Yes, that's right.
For this? How badly does the city need this position filled?
You mean the private company?
The private.
SEH.
So you were so you're interviewed by SEH.
Yeah.
How badly do they need this filled?
It's really the front door.
Okay, so it's super important.
Very. It's like step number one.
Okay, so that does have me wonder about why they haven't gotten back to you. Have you reached out at all since 3 weeks ago?
No, I haven't, George.
So what I recommend you do, Vern, is send a very quick email. Now, you have other opportunities on the table as well?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so all you got to do
Several.
is
Yes.
send an email that says, circling back with you, loved our conversation. I'm very interested in the position. Thanks, Eric. Take care. Eric actually, I'm sure, relates to exactly what you're working on here, Vern.
Really good.
Yep. And so you're going to just circle. Yep. Text it exactly. So what you're going to do is send a quick email, something like, I'm circling back to check in on that position. Wanted to make sure I'm very interested in this. This is, right what I'm looking for. Do you have any updates for me? I do have other job opportunities on the table. That's it. Very, like 2 to 3 sentences max. No big deal. You're just checking in with them. And part of this is, I don't know SEH, but I know from experience that most companies don't have a great hiring process. The companies that do have a really good hiring process, it's like, it's very set up, and they have all kind of a whole interview process, and it's, it works like clockwork, and they're usually good about communicating to you. If you don't get the position, they'll send an email and say, thank you for your interest. We're looking at other candidates. Just, it's very
Really?
mechanical. But since they haven't sent you that, my guess is that they just don't have that great of a hiring process. And so you taking initiative and just saying what's so. I'm very interested in this position. Got other opportunities on the table. I'd like to hear back from you. No big deal. Real easy breezy. Because what that does for them is, let's just say that somebody has, their second or third job there is interviewing and the kind of managing the hiring process. And so they've got other responsibilities. They might be, running a little thin. And so they get that email from you and they're just like, oh, great. Thank you, Vern. And it just puts it back at the top of their inbox. It puts it at the top of their to-do list. And my guess is that you'll hear something back within the week from them.
Terrific, George. Two things I should fill you in, by the way. This is of the several that I've got. This is number one. This is the number one choice. This is a favorite one. Question number two is, should it be done in an email? And then maybe third is to acknowledge the fact that I have other ones is like, should we say, twofold concern. One is that they might feel that they don't need to resolve, they don't need to deal with you.
No. I get that you would think that, but you out of your best interest, you don't want to just kind of keep waiting and assuming and hoping.
Right.
Because
exactly.
You don't know everything that's going on in that organization. And it's possible that within the last 3 weeks, something changed and they're going in a different direction, and they might not even be thinking about you at all. But given that it sounds like the interview went well, and maybe they feel guilty. Maybe it's like, oh, like unconsciously somewhere, they're like, uh-oh, things have changed, and you're out of sight, out of mind. So you need to put yourself in sight.
Yeah.
And you saying that you have other opportunities, it's not a threat. It's just the truth. And of course you have other opportunities. It's your job to get a job. And so I understand that you might have that concern, but no, go ahead, circle back with them. And, that's just you showing initiative and taking care of yourself. And that way too, let's say that, they're moving on it and they're just moving slowly. Then they'll send an email that says, Vern, thanks so much for circling back. Sorry, we haven't been in touch. Yes, we're very interested. We're working through some things. We're, hoping to set up the next interview, in a week or two. That, at the
Excellent.
very least. And so, it's absolutely appropriate for you to let them know that you have other opportunities and light a little bit of a fire under their butt.
Excellent. Thank you, Elias. Really
Awesome. Vern, I'm
appreciate.
looking forward to hearing about the response and what happens with this. And
Great.
I'm going to pile on here, this might not have nothing to do with you, Vern, but as an educational piece for everybody listening in. When you start getting responses and interviews, that's really the time for you to continue your search. That might sound kind of counterintuitive, like, oh, I'm starting to get things in. But the truth is that when things are hot, that's the time to move. It's taken you time to get your resume together, to get out there and be interviewing, and you've built that momentum. So now that you're moving, you want to maintain that momentum. Things are, who knows how, at the companies that are starting to get back to you. And so you don't want to have to just hope for those to pan out and then let your momentum drop back down. And then in a month be like, oh shoot, here I did all this work and none of these panned out. And then you have to go back through all that emotional energy of ramping yourself back up, etc. Don't do that to yourself. When you've got irons in the fire, it's the time to put another one in and keep the process going. So Vern, keep responding to ads, keep your search going, keep the possibilities open and coming in. And that goes for everybody. That's the strategy to take. One of the things I share is that when I get a new client, I get off the phone, we get our first session set up, I will do something to celebrate. I'll tell my wife or somebody at work, I'll be like, yay. And then I turn right back around and I follow up with another lead, because I have that good energy and I want to double down on it. I want to take advantage of all the work I've done to get up to this point. I've invested a lot of time and energy, and I want to make the most of that. So I hope that's helpful to everybody. Vern, great stuff. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for joining in.
Always.
James, I want to hear from you. And James, as you're coming off mute, what I'll say to everybody, this is Career Lab Wednesday, every Wednesday, noon to 1 p.m. Central. I'm here to help you in your job, to help you develop in your career. So there's no question that's too small, no question too big. I love it when you join in over weeks and I get to work with you, and your journey is a gift to everybody who's listening in and learning alongside. So that being said, you can ask questions through the comment section on LinkedIn and YouTube, or even better, you can jump in directly on the Zoom link and I can talk with you one-to-one. James, talk to me. I heard you had an interview.
Yes, I am James, and I had an interview. I had a few interviews over the past few weeks.
Oh,
Not a
fantastic.
few, one job, but a few interviews with it. So I'm on. I
Okay.
just completed this past Thursday the second round of interviews, and second of three. And I am curious to know how to prepare for the third round of interviews. My understanding is that this last interview will be with the vice president of the organization, and this position reports to that individual.
Okay.
So I think this person is going to be interviewing. Just my thought is that they'll be interviewing to see if there's a fit, but I'm not. That's another matter. What are they likely to be interviewing for? What is the angle that they're going to take in the interviewing process? And the other question is that I have for myself is how do I want to position myself when I'm interviewing them? In other words, simply put, kind of questions should I ask them? Because the simple, well, I won't say the simple questions, but I've had I've had 4 interviews so far. In this first round was 1 and 3 in the second round. So I've asked questions. So I want to come off differently this time and ask and sound thought provoking and excited about it, and let them know that I'm really curious and I'm really wanting deeper clarity and understanding.
Perfect. Okay, so James, well, to start with, let's start with the wanting to come off as thought provoking. So this is a really important thing in interviewing and in general in life is there right there. And I am going to pull up the developmental model and walk us through it. So some of you have been on here before, have seen me use this tool, and it's something that really helps. Now it looks a little complex. Don't let it intimidate you. I have a video on it in my YouTube. You can always go review it more there. But this is a model developed by Dr. Bob Wright and Dr. Gordon Medlock, who some of you have known. He joins in here sometimes. And what this is kind of our internal map of what's going on with us emotionally. So James, when you're talking about wanting to come off as have your questions be thought-provoking and things, one thing internally I suspect is that you have a hunger to be seen, you have a hunger to matter, and to belong. So that deals with level 2. Now, if that's my intention in a interview setting, that can sometimes be misplaced. And so what I would recommend, James, is that you actually affirm yourself, and you can say, wow, I've had, you said a total of 4 or 5 interviews so far?
4.
Okay, I've had 4 interviews. Clearly, they are thinking I'm a fit. I wouldn't have made it this far. See, so you can be affirming yourself in that. And noticing your hunger. And then you can also be checking, see, because there's the underneath level 2, there's level 1, which is the scarcity. The reality is right now I don't have a job, so there's scarcity there. And just acknowledging that it helps then for you to be able to trust in yourself and trust in them, that they're going to be, straightforward, direct with you. And again, affirming yourself that, oh, I've made it this far. So then now we're going to move into level 3. So oftentimes if somebody's asking me a question that I don't have all the answers to or something, and I might then all of a sudden drop into scarcity and hunger for affirmation, and I might respond in a slightly reactive way, that's fine. We all do it like many, many times a day. This is like the underbelly of humanity. No big deal. But as you're affirming yourself, then you're in good shape to assert yourself. And so you have already had 4 interviews. You've learned about the job. You've asked questions. And apparently those questions were good questions and meaningful to them because you made it to another interview. So now what you really want to be looking at is effectively asserting yourself in the next interview. You're going to be with the VP. So James, first of all, is this helpful to look at the model this way and kind of talk about the internal process?
Um,
Not so.
I'm trying to. I'm sitting with it. Some of it I've done. I have asserted myself or affirmed myself is what I meant.
Okay.
I've done some of that. I do think that they think that I am a fit
Okay.
thus far, at least. What I'm looking at is I want to be more of a fit than the other candidates who
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about, haven't seen before, and I want to show up differently. I want to do something that has them see me differently than they would see them.
Okay. Well, perfect. So the thing then that you're going to want to do is ask questions that you really have, and be authentic about what you're curious about in the position. And the other thing is to remember that more and more, just listing off your experiences and what you know, is not the most important thing. You've already proven yourself in that regard. So you trying to imagine what other people might be saying and how you could one up them, that's not going to help at all. And this is, I'll stop sharing this for now. This is an important thing for everybody to hear. So James, I'm going to go to a teaching moment for everybody. I did a presentation last week, and I was talking to the hiring manager, and what he was saying, and this is at a place where they hire a lot of engineers, so you do have to know a lot, you have to be smart. And what he said was that what he looks for when he's interviewing is not people who say, I know how to do this, I know how to do this, I know how to do this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and that's all they bring. What he's really looking for is how aware are they? How open are they to learning things that they don't know? And so, James, as you're going into the interview, all you need to do is respond to any questions that they ask you with what so, and then follow up with a question that's relevant to the position. So let's talk a little more about this position, James. What are the responsibilities that you'd have?
In this position, I'll be working in a wing or a department within the alumni association
Okay.
at one of the universities. And basically, there are things that go on. I'm the person that catches all these stuff that everybody else doesn't want to do because they don't have time or otherwise. So there's a lot of small things, answering questions. Uh, the job is complete, but you just need to do these last things to tidy up here or tie that
Oh,
in. So I do a lot of tying up a loose ends. So I talk to a lot of people, let people know what's going on. Um, to that's the nature of the role. So as far as specifics, answering basic questions that would probably go to someone else, should be asked by someone else, but to relieve them of having to answer all the questions.
mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with finances as far as dealing with what they call them, reimbursing people and paying off vendors, which also means inputting vendors into the system. Eventually, I will have to learn how to do a new system.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting in on brainstorming sessions for the budgets for the departments within this group,
Mm-hmm.
and contacting alumni, contacting and talking to the alumni and talking to faculty
Mm-hmm.
about the happenings that are going on and what people are up to, just spreading the word.
Okay. Okay, good. So this, you would be juggling a lot of different things, and it sounds like you'd be needing to talk to a lot of people.
Yes, and also along the lines of tidying up on loose ends, all of the other departments, they have their needs and et cetera, et cetera. So I'll be interfacing with those departments as well.
Okay, so what at this point now, what questions do you have?
I would like to know what I will be talking about with alumni and faculty, because I'm not raising money. I'm notifying them of things, but I'm not raising money. So I'm curious to know what those interactions would look like. But I don't know what that has to do with really me getting the job.
That has, okay, so the way I would frame it, James, in your interview is, okay, so I understand the tasks. This is all stuff I can do. You know, I'm an analyzer personality. You know, at my previous position, I created systems for tracking documents and this kind of thing. So you know, I'm not going to be, this isn't a fundraising goal, but I'm basically role, but I'm facilitating closing the loop on things. Would I be in the meetings with a fundraiser? Would I be in that meeting, or is this going to be something where they send me a message and then it's my responsibility to just complete the task? You know, what I'm curious about, what kind of you know, am I going to have a script? Am I going to be creating scripts? Am I going to be learning alongside somebody? These are the questions I would be asking, James. How do they sound to you?
I hadn't thought about that, GD. I like that.
Okay, cool.
It really gets into what the experience.
Cool. Yeah, because
What,
when you're going into a job, there's the first 6 months is a whole lot of you learning.
yes.
And so now your questions are going to be about that learning process. Do they have, what kind of onboard training do they have? Is it videos that you go through? Is it, you know, kind of tests that you go through, or worksheets, or are you working alongside somebody? And that I would, if what I would think would be ideal if I was you, James, going into that position, I would want to be able to hear in as many of the meetings and phone calls as I could, so that I would get a sense of what the relationship is like, what the tone is that I would want to have in any follow-up calls or follow-up emails. If that's not a possibility, if that's not how the system is set up, then, you know, you might ask, okay, great, you know, would I what are the lines of communication that I would have with the fundraisers? And so right there, then, if I'm the VP and you're asking me these kinds of questions, I know you're really, you know, you're picturing yourself in there, and you're asking me questions that are having me think about the role. And you know, I think it just sets up a helpful conversation. How are we doing, James? This is going good?
This is great. I like that question about the nature of the onboarding. I just knew at this point I just know that I'm getting training, but I did not really get into the nature of the training and whether it's in person. When you say in person, I'm thinking like one-on-one. versus a test versus seminars. I'm assuming that most of them will probably be on Zoom or something, but working with someone is not, that's an effective way, I think, to do things as well.
Mhm.
Especially because you get to hear about the details that training doesn't often cover.
And look, in fundraising is its own kind of sales job. And in sales, one of the best things that people can do is for somebody to be able to listen in. You know, if I was doing business to business sales and I was training somebody, I would have them come along with me to the different locations. And that's what I would do. I would, you know, have them take notes and, you know, be conscious of any loose ends, things that I might be forgetting, where I would, and if I was the lead on sales in that meeting, you know, my real job would be to be making meaningful contact with that person. And in fundraising, it's all about the relationships, you know, of they've been establishing relationships, I imagine, for years. And, you know, and I can totally see the need for your position, because it's a lot to navigate in terms of the follow-up emails, this kind of thing. And just to have the donors, you know, feel like where they're giving the money to is really, you know, functioning well, and that they're being tended to. So
That's actually a question, GD, because I'm not in sales. I'm more or less sharing information, distributing and giving. I'm giving people information and letting them know what's going on, but I'm not actually selling or trying. Well,
no, you're not. It's not a direct sales role, James, but I think it's more helpful, and this goes for everybody listening in, to consider that we're all in sales. So you providing valuable information, that serves a function in a sales relationship. So we could talk about you and me, James, and Jane. Jane will get this too. So I'm not an analytical type. I don't love details. I don't love making sure that all the boxes are checked right. It's not something that I innately care about. But I know it's important. And so I would want somebody like you, James, who you really care about that. You like to make sure that everything is in order, that all the data is correct. And so, you know, you and I would be a better sales team than just me on my own.
James, it sounds like you're sales support.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, Vern. It very,
okay.
And so and I know it's fundraising, but I think it's helpful to look at it through kind of a sales lens. It's all about the relationships, and you are helping those relationships feel and be secure, because a lot of things can slip through the cracks, and your job is to have things not slip through the cracks.
Kind of sounds like a farmer. Oftentimes, not everybody's harvesting, but oftentimes you're cultivating.
Yep. Well said, Vern. And so James, all of the questions that you can ask are just about what systems are in place. If they're in place, is part of your job to establish systems. What's the onboard training like? How are you feeling about this? You think you're in good shape?
You just shed some light on the area that I could engage them fully, more thoroughly in, and that actually would be it. I'm not selling, so what would I be talking to them about? How would I be interacting with faculty? How would I be interacting with donors? Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. We are coming up on the end of the hour, James. I'm so glad you got in today. Great work getting in those interviews, and going in there, knowing that you're already a likely candidate for it, and that now you're interviewing them, you're just finding out more about the role and how things really work in there. And that's going to be your best shot, and having you come out of that next interview feeling like, wow, I really learned more about this position. And this is something I would be excited to do.
Okay.
Fantastic. Well, great. Everybody, thank you so much for joining in today. I will be back next week. We're going to be looking at, working through issues in the workplace. So that'll be fun. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Vern. Thank you, James. Thank you, Jane. And right before logging out, Jane, let's go ahead and throw in that link for the app. So if you are an Android user, this will interest you. We're developing an app, and it's in some testing phases now. And so we can share it with Android users, unfortunately not yet with iOS. But go ahead and take a look at that. You'll be able to download the test version of it on your phone. And right now it'll be free for you. We'll put in some payment blocks on it later, but all of the content there is free to you right now. So go ahead, download that, take a look at it, and let me know what you like about it. All right. Take care, everybody. See you next week. You bet, Alexander.
Bye, GG. And
Bye,
thank you.
Jake.